Hi there. In this quick video we're going to be going over some literary terms in short stories. You might hopefully actually already know several of these terms, but this will just serve as a quick reminder of what those terms mean and how you analyze them in short stories. So the first term we want to discuss is point of view. Now another word for point of view is the word perspective. Perspective means how you see something. So depending on where I'm standing, for example, in a classroom, I have a different perspective. If I'm standing by the door, I'm going to have a different perspective of what's going on than if I'm sitting at a desk in the corner. Point of view is like that in a short story, except we're talking about the narrator. So, there's two general kinds of point of view that we talk about in short stories with the narrator, and the first kind is first-person point of view. First-person point of view is when the narrator is a character in the story. This means that you, the reader, are learning everything about the plot from that character. Now think how this would affect what you, the reader, are learning. Depending on where the character is and what the character knows, that is what you are going to know. The next type of point of view of the narrator that we get to in most short stories is third-person point of view. Now third-person point of view means that it is someone outside of the story. You can kind of think of this as if somebody's standing outside the classroom watching what's going on in the classroom. They are not necessarily involved in the plot of whatever is going on in the classroom, but they can see it from outside and tell the reader about it. Now, there are two kinds of third-person point of view. The first kind is limited. And as you can guess, probably from the name, limited third-person point of view means they only know a little bit of what's going on. A limited third-person narrator might only be able to see what's going on from one person's point of view, not everyone's, which is the other kind, which is omniscient. I'm going to run out of room to spell it here, but an omniscient third-person narrator is a narrator that can see and know everything. Even into everyone's heads, whereas a third person limited would maybe only know one person's thoughts and actions or a couple people's thoughts and actions. So, the next question you have to think of is, what do you know as a reader depending on the narrator's point of view? How is having a first-person narrator, a third-person limited, or a third-person omniscient narrator going to change what you know as a reader? Depending on that, you might have to actually think a little bit about what's going on in the story and who you can trust. In the story you're going to read in this lesson, the type of narrator plays a really big part in what you know as the reader. So the next term that we want to discuss is imagery. As you can see in the word imagery, there is the word image, image meaning picture. Since you're reading words, the job of the author, since you're not watching a movie or a TV show, is to give you images of what is going on with their words. So in general, you can think of your five senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and feel, and you're going to get these from the narrator. Now, how does this go back with our first-person or third-person limited or omniscient narrator? Well, depending on the type of narrator, you're going to get different images. If you have a first-person narrator, you're going to have different sights than if you have a third-person omniscient narrator. So, that's what you need to be thinking of with imagery. Now, our next term is foreshadowing. If we look at the term foreshadowing here, those of you who are good at your Greek and Latin roots, you know that fore means before, so previous to. And shadow, think about a shadow. If you see a shadow, what do you know? You know that something is there. So if you see a shadow coming down, you're looking at the sidewalk, you see a shadow of a person, you know that that shadow is telling you there is a person. So in essence, what foreshadowing is doing is telling you that something is going to happen before it actually happens. So I want you to think of scary movies. Scary movies a lot of the time use music as foreshadowing. They'll play really scary music, and then you know as a viewer that something scary is going to happen. You can think of foreshadowing as just hints that the author leaves you to tell you that a plot point is going to happen. In the short story you're going to be reading in this lesson, the author uses imagery as foreshadowing. So you can think kind of the saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. If you have an image of smoke, you as the reader can assume that there's going to be fire. While you're reading, you need to think really hard about what the imagery is telling you. Is it telling you that something is happening that maybe the narrator isn't letting on to? Is the narrator keeping secrets from you? Should you be looking at the imagery a little closer to figure out what is actually going on? The last term that I want to discuss is theme. Hopefully everyone has dealt with theme before, but just to review, theme is an insight into the human condition. So theme can be taken from stories, but it's not necessarily only tied to that story, because it's a truth about the human condition that the reader should learn. That isn't to say that you are going to agree with that truth, but it's to say that it's a truth about the human condition. So, for example, there can be the lesson that good always wins out in the end. There are many stories that have the theme of that can be specific to those stories, but once you pull the theme out of those stories, you don't have to have the story anymore. That's a truth about the human condition that the reader can learn. So, in the story that we're going to be reading in this lesson, the theme of the story is developed by those previous terms that we just mentioned. So looking back at the narrator and how the narrator works, looking back at the imagery that's focused on, those things are going to develop your theme. So, while you are reading, you are going to use your eyes and you are going to focus on the point of view of the narrator. Is it first person? Is it third person, limited, or omniscient? How does that change what you know as the reader? You're going to focus on the imagery. You're going to focus on foreshadowing. Is the author hinting at anything with that imagery? And lastly, you're going to focus on theme. What should you learn about the human condition as a reader?